Hi, this is David Self. This is my presentation for AEP 800 module number 5, Barriers to Web 2.0. And I'll start out my presentation by providing a summary of the articles that were required for reading for this module. The first one titled Barriers to Using Web 2.0 in 21st Century Schools. And this article talked about how Web 2.0 tools have provided global access to information for our students and changed our expectations of what we want our students to learn as 21st century students. And it also discussed how all schools are making changes and are affected by these tools, whether it's through implementing them into the curriculum or just making changes in policy regarding student access to this, to the internet and so forth. It did go on to talk about how even though we've implemented some of this technology, test scores have not improved, and this has contributed to teachers having a lack of time, training, and support. The article went on to discuss the digital divide, how not all schools are equally equipped, and some students have better access at home to the internet than others, and some have no access at all. It talked about how some students are relying on public Wi-Fi connections that aren't able to handle some of the requirements of schoolwork and homework, and just a quality of broadband connection can be a major factor. The article went on to discuss how personal electronic devices are one way that the digital divide is being closed, but yet they do have some limitations. Advantages to Web 2.0 tools in schools are that students are creating their own learning experience and having access to this huge amount of information. It also provides an atmosphere of collaboration and enhances creativity and innovation. Critical thinking and problem solving, along with leadership and digital responsibility, are also being implemented as an advantage to 2.0 tools. Disadvantages to some of these 2.0 tools are a social network addiction. We're possibly introducing our networks to spam and viruses. Obviously, we want to look at cyberbullying can be an issue, and copyright infringement. The second article was titled 7 Common Barriers That Obstruct Tech Adoption and Education. And I found that I'm only really highlighting one of the barriers it listed because the other 6 I've already covered in the first one. They were kind of repetitive. And that was a lot of schools lack vision. And the schools are not properly implementing and embracing the new technology in order to, they're just not doing it correctly in order to allow for stronger student usage. A lot of times their Wi-Fi doesn't support some of their personal electronic devices that are being used as well. The third article for reading was called The Digital Divide, A Quarter of the Nation is Without Broadband. I thought the most telling statement in this entire article was that less than 50% of our households in America that have an income of $20,000 or less are not connected to the internet. Although we have government programs that exist to try to close this digital divide, there's still no real solid efforts being made. And a lot of our students have access now to smartphones and other devices that are helping, but those also have some problems, like they run out of data, and they're just not as reliable when it comes to being able to do some schoolwork as you might have with a personal computer or a laptop. Also, there are still parts of our country that are still relying on old connection methods to the internet, such as dial-up and satellite. The last and final required reading was about Open Educational Resources, and this is an organization that is providing resources to teachers as part of a public domain at no cost, and it's really trying to compete with other commercial entities that are charging, and that brings in the whole funding issue as well. It went on to highlight, this article highlighted several districts and schools in our country that have embraced this technology, or this resource, I should say, and how they're implementing this new technology. After that, the module went on to ask several questions, and I'll go through each one of those now. Question number 1, do you feel the digital divide can be resolved? Why or why not? No, I do not believe the digital divide can be resolved. I think that poverty is the driving factor, and in our current society and world state, there's always going to be people who have things and people who do not have them. and that includes internet connections and the hardware to access the internet. Some of our students just simply don't have the income to get that latest technology. Many of our students are using hand-me-down technology, such as, I see this a lot in my classroom, old cell phones, old tablets, old computers that just aren't capable of handling some of the new technology that's out there. They don't have access necessarily to the internet at home, and they're relying on places like public libraries, community centers to get online access, and this limits them in being able to do homework and schoolwork the way someone who would have that access. And that's going to just keep that divide open. So I don't ever think that we'll be able to close the digital gap completely. Question number 2, what skill sets do you feel 21st century students must acquire prior to graduation? I think I've said this before in some of my earlier presentations. Our students have a really small worldview. I think they need a large worldview, realizing there's so much information out there outside of their immediate surroundings. I think we need to also provide our students knowledge to utilize technology at the most basic level, even if it's just how to use a laptop, how to use the internet, and so forth, to be able to access this information. I think our students also need to have an understanding that technological advancements are not just for school. They're happening everywhere. I look at blue-collar careers. I grew up in an agricultural setting, and even farmers in my hometown are using GPS to pinpoint locations to plant crops, and everything you can think of is using technology, including home and personal finances and continuing higher education. Question number 3 asks, what impact has the global economy had on your personal use of the internet? And in all honesty, from a personal perspective, I don't see how the global economy has affected me at all with my personal internet usage. Now, my school usage hasn't really been impacted either. I started teaching in the year 2000, 2001, and internet access has always been accessible in my entire career. There has been some funding issues regarding technology, but that's more at the state level, not the global level. But it hasn't really affected the internet usage from my standpoint at all. Question number 4, what technology training do you still need to effectively integrate technology into your current position? I think I need more information about and more knowledge about interactive classroom. I think about Google Classroom and some of the virtual classrooms that would allow me to connect with my students outside of the regular school day to expand my lessons. And I don't know much about that. I'd like to know more. I feel like I need more knowledge of free resources. One resource I do use is called Padlet.com, but that's just one of numerous ones that are out there. And I feel like I need more of that type of information as well. I feel like I need more training in the ability to be able to implement student and teacher use of technology hardware into everyday classroom situations that would give me an easier, more eco-friendly method of student assessment, such as testing and results. Question number 5, is your school or district equipped with 21st century technology? And explain. Yes, we are very connected. We have Wi-Fi access at our school for all staff and students, computer labs that you can take your classroom to. We even have mobile laptop carts that we can check out and bring into our classroom. Some of our curriculum areas have applied for grants and received funding to buy Chromebooks and use Google Classroom. All students in our school have a personal account that they can access our network to store information and so forth. Parent and student view is another thing we use where students and parents can log on from home and access homework, grades, all kinds of things. There's student scores and so forth, transcripts. We have an online enrollment system we use nowadays where students enroll in the summer online. They still have to come to school to finalize, but most of that is done outside of the school day. Our library recently was renovated due to a bond project and now is more of a modern media center. And our staff also have personal emails and laptops for communication and storing information and planning. There are smart boards in most of our classrooms, and our school and our district are taking advantage of social media accounts to share information with our school community. Question number 6, what are the advantages of innovative practices in schools? And I think most of all, it's just access of information. I think it allows our students to individualize their education by working at their own pace. And the biggest thing I think is it can expand our school, our classroom beyond the physical school. I mean, we can continue our lesson outside of the school day and so forth. I think another advantage is that it increases the skills that are needed for 21st century learning, and it creates a more transparent school community. It allows parents and caregivers access to student performance and information on an immediate, regular basis. I also think that it's easier as an educator, it's easier for us to store and access student records, and allows for faster grading and posting of student grades and performance. Question number 7, what disadvantages do you see? I think there's a loss of some traditional approaches to teaching and learning. I think mainly about handwriting. And, I know students don't really write much anymore. They type more on a keyboard, but I still think there's some value to being able to sign your name and put a pen to paper, a pencil to paper, and write. I also think about my own personal experience as a student when I was in the 80s. One of the most beneficial class that I took in high school was probably typing. I type every day. I know how to use a keyboard properly. And now I know that in one of our computer skills classes, it's just a unit that's taught. There's not a full year class for it. And I think that I think that our students are relying on reading on small devices, computer screens, and so forth. And I think there's a connection that's lost by not actually opening up and flipping through the pages of a book. I think another disadvantage is that our students are engaged in inappropriate use of technology during the school day, such as social media, inappropriate internet usage, and just their personal electronic devices being distractions in the classroom. And most of all, I think there's just a lack of interpersonal communication. If you just go to our cafeteria at lunch, students are on phones and tablets, they have headphones on, they're not interacting with other students personally. There's a loss of human interaction. And last of all, the last question. Have you experienced problems with cyberbullying or other inappropriate internet usage with students? I have not seen any personal cyberbullying cases in my classroom, but I do know it's been a problem in our school and has been dealt with suspensions and expulsions even. Inappropriate internet usage, yes. Students are not accessing assigned websites. There's been times I've taken my kids to the computer lab and they're supposed to be looking at a certain educational site, but they're looking at something else, and accessing internet when not instructed to do so. Social media is a huge problem with Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook, and so forth, texting back and forth between students that are not even in the classroom. And obviously here lately, the newest one I've noticed is during the class when students are supposed to be working on their homework, they're watching YouTube and Netflix videos. They're listening to music with headphones on while you're trying to teach, and it can be a huge distraction and problem. I think those are the biggest problems I've seen with inappropriate internet usages. And last of all, these are my works cited for the 4 sources required for the module. Once again, I'm David Self, and thank you for viewing my presentation.